It was the summer of 2019, a date that will forever be burned into my memory. Why? Because that was the moment my perfect marriage shattered into 1,000 pieces. And trust me, when a woman like me gets hurt, she doesn't just cry. She plans. Oh, before I go deeper into this roller coaster of betrayal and revenge, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Because what you're about to hear, you won't find in any movie. This is real. This is raw. And it's the kind of story that makes you wonder, could this happen to me? Now let me tell you, I wasn't just any ordinary wife. I was the one who believed in loyalty and sacrifice, in building a life brick by brick with the man I loved. But he had other plans. Behind my back, late-night calls, strange expenses, a double life I never asked for. And when the truth finally slapped me in the face, I had two choices: crumble like a victim, or rise like a storm. I chose the storm. And that storm drained every last dollar from his bank account. How I did it, why I did it, and what happened after, well, that's the part that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and justice. Now, before I drag you into the storm, let me rewind the tape a little, because to understand why I did what I did, you need to know who I was, and who he pretended to be. I met Daniel. Yeah, that's what I'll call him, when I was in my late 20s. Back then, he seemed like the kind of man every woman secretly dreams about. Charming smile, steady job, the type who opens doors and remembers how you take your coffee. I thought I had hit life's jackpot. And you know what? For years, I really believed it. We built a life together. A nice little house in the suburbs, 2 cars parked outside, vacations once a year. We had Sunday barbecues with friends. And people would look at us and whisper, "They're the perfect couple." And I used to smile, thinking, yeah, maybe we really were. But perfection, my friends, is a dangerous illusion. It hides the cracks until they suddenly split wide open. Here's the thing. I wasn't just a wife who stayed home waiting for scraps of attention. I worked hard. I contributed. I managed the bills, kept track of savings, made sure our future was secure. Trust me, I was the backbone holding everything together, and I was proud of it. Funny, right? How the one who holds the pieces together is always the last to see the cracks. Looking back now, I realize Daniel was always good at playing roles. The loving husband in front of friends, the reliable man at work, the gentle partner who kissed me goodnight. But behind the mask, something else was brewing. Something dark. And I, blind with love and loyalty, didn't see it coming. But don't worry, you'll see it with me, step by step. Every red flag, every secret, every betrayal that pushed me toward the one decision that would change everything. They say love makes you blind. And in my case, it made me deaf too. Deaf to the alarms ringing right under my nose. The first signs weren't loud. They were whispers. A late night at the office here, an emergency meeting there. I remember one evening when Daniel came home smelling like cologne I didn't own. I laughed it off. Told myself maybe he sprayed something at work. Yeah, I wanted to believe that. Then there were the little lies. Small harmless ones, or so I thought. He'd say his phone battery died, or that he left his charger at the office. But tell me, since when does a grown man forget his charger 3 nights in a row? Even now, I shake my head. Ladies, have you ever looked at your man's phone and thought, why is his screen always facing down? Yeah, that was me. Except back then, I convinced myself I was overthinking. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. And it wasn't just the phone. He started spending money strangely. Restaurant charges I didn't recognize. Random gifts I never saw. I remember asking him once, "Babe, who's Tiffany?" He laughed and said it was a jewelry store ad. I wanted to believe him, so I did. My heart said trust. My gut said run. I chose the heart. But here's the cruel part about betrayal. You don't see it all at once. It creeps in like a shadow, slowly covering the light until one day, you wake up in the dark, and that darkness had started to wrap around me. I brushed off the warnings from my best friend. I ignored the uneasy silence during dinners. I even silenced my own doubts because the idea of losing him scared me more than the truth. But truth doesn't stay hidden forever, and when it finally came for me, it didn't knock politely. It kicked down the door and shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The night I discovered the truth still plays in my mind like a movie I wish I could unwatch. It was a Friday in late October. Daniel had told me he was working late, again. I believed him, or at least I tried to, but something inside me, something small and sharp, wouldn't let me rest. So, I decided to check our online bank account, not because I was suspicious. At least that's what I told myself. No, I just wanted to make sure the bills were covered. That's what I told myself. But what I saw nearly stopped my heart. Dinner charges at expensive restaurants, hotel bookings, jewelry store purchases, and none of them were for me. Do you know that feeling when the ground slips from under your feet? That was me, sitting in the dark with a laptop screen glowing back lies I couldn't ignore anymore. And the best part? The jewelry store receipt had a personal note attached. To my forever love. Forever love? Excuse me, I was his wife. Who was she? I froze. My mind screamed to confront him right then, but another part of me whispered, "No, don't show your cards yet." And that whisper saved me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there rehearsing his excuses in my head before he even said them. And when he walked in at 2 a.m. smelling like perfume that didn't belong to me, I smiled. Imagine that. I smiled, kissed him goodnight, and acted like I didn't know a thing. 'Cause I had made a decision. If he wanted to play games, I was going to learn the rules, and then rewrite them. You know how in movies, the betrayed wife throws his clothes out on the lawn? Yeah, not me. Too easy. Too predictable. I had something much better in mind. In the days that followed, I became an actress. I laughed at his jokes, cooked his meals, played the perfect wife. But behind that smile I was digging into his emails, tracking his credit cards, piecing together every lie like a puzzle. And with each discovery, my anger grew, until anger turned into power. Because here's the truth. Betrayal doesn't just break you. It shapes you. And the woman who cried on that October night, she didn't survive. A new woman was born instead. And she wasn't about to sit quietly while her husband spent our life on his mistress. The days after that night were some of the hardest of my life. Imagine lying next to someone who swore to love you forever, and all you can see is a stranger with secrets crawling under his skin. Every smile he gave me felt fake. Every touch burned like a lie. And yet, I kept smiling back. I had to. Inside, I was broken. I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear. I screamed into pillows when the house was empty. Some nights, I just sat in the kitchen, staring at the bills, wondering how long this man had been living two lives. The hurt was sharp, like glass, cutting me with every thought. But slowly, pain turned into something else. Something sharper. Anger. That anger lit a fire inside me, and from that fire came a plan. A dangerous plan. One that required silence, patience, and a smile convincing enough to fool even him. Funny thing is, he thought he was the actor in this story. Little did he know, the real performance was happening right across the dinner table. I started small. I memorized his new passwords while pretending not to care. I learned his spending patterns, the places he visited, the times he slipped away. I became his shadow without him ever noticing. The same way he studied that woman's face, I studied his lies. The more I uncovered, the clearer my path became. I didn't just want to confront him. That would be too easy. I wanted him to feel what I felt. Helpless, blindsided, betrayed. And I knew exactly how to do it, because while he thought love made me weak, he had forgotten something. Love had also given me access. Access to everything. Joint accounts. Shared savings, investments, credit cards. I wasn't just the wife. I was the financial gatekeeper, and that, my friends, was my weapon. But revenge isn't rushed. It has to be cooked slow, served cold. So I waited. I played my role, smiled at his stories, even let him kiss me goodnight, all while secretly preparing the perfect strike. Every laugh I faked, every dinner I cooked, it was all part of the countdown. And when the moment finally came, I was ready. Ready to drain him of more than just love. Ready to take back control, dollar by dollar, until there was nothing left for him but the bitter taste of his own betrayal. If you think revenge is a loud explosion, you haven't met patience. My plan wasn't a Hollywood heist with masks and ropes. It was quieter. It was legal looking on paper, invisible in plain sight, and it moved like a slow, sure tide, gently pulling everything away until there was nothing left to stand on. Remember how I said I was the one who managed the bills? That wasn't a small detail. It was my advantage. I knew where the money lived in our house, which accounts, which cards, which automatic payments kept our life running. More importantly, I knew the rhythms of our money. I knew when funds moved, when the buffer was thin, and when the bank notices slept. You ever notice how people assume numbers are boring? That's their mistake. Numbers are loyal to whoever reads them. I read them and they told me a story, his lies written in dollars and cents. I didn't rush. I waited for the moments when his guard was down. I rearranged things quietly. I redirected tiny streams of cash, moved small amounts that wouldn't trigger alarms, closed little holes of waste he had built for someone else. It was surgical. It was slow. And the best part, he never saw the stitches. By the way, this is not a tutorial. Please don't try to be a vigilante. Karma has a way of writing its own receipts. Every action was measured. Every transfer looked ordinary on the surface. Friends and neighbors still saw the same house, the same cars. He still had his dinners, his late-night stories, and his lies. But behind the scenes, our life account was changing. Savings that we'd planned to use for vacations quietly started to disappear from his control. Bills he thought were paid by one card were being shifted to others. Little by little, the cushion he relied on thinned. What I wanted was not to ruin him for the sake of cruelty. I wanted to remove his power, the power that allowed him to choose me as an option. I wanted him to feel the emptiness his choices created. I wanted to strip back the life he had spent so carelessly, so he could taste the consequences. There was a moment, about 3 weeks in, when I stared at the account summary and felt something I hadn't felt since the first months of our marriage. Calm. For the first time since the truth, I slept without waking. The plan was working. My hands were steady. My breath was steady. I had become both judge and jury in a court I set up at my own kitchen table. And then came the night he noticed. He didn't scream at first. He didn't beg. He stared at the screen like a man watching himself drown in slow motion. What he said next, his voice thin and small, changed everything. But I'll get to that. First, you need to know how he tried to fix what he had broken. I still remember the night Daniel finally realized. It was one of those cold November evenings, the kind where even the streetlights seemed to shiver. He came home smiling like everything was normal, like he hadn't been living a double life for months. And then he checked his phone, then his laptop, and the color drained from his face faster than I could blink. I pretended to be in the living room, casually scrolling my phone, when I heard the first muffled curse slip from his lips. Then came the pacing, the muttered apologies. Not to me, mind you, but to himself. He kept shaking his head, staring at the account balance like it was some cruel illusion. And it was an illusion he had created for himself. He probably thought I'd burst into tears, maybe throw his shoes across the room. Nope, not me. Not this time. I was calm. I smiled, made a cup of tea, and waited. Patience, after all, is its own weapon. When he finally confronted me, his words stumbled. What happened to the accounts?" he asked, voice tight, eyes wide. I looked him straight in the eye and said nothing. Just a pause, a long pause. Sometimes silence is the loudest sound in the room, and that night, silence was deafening. He tried to reason, to charm, to manipulate, but I had learned every trick he knew. Every excuse, every smile, every fake apology, I had seen it all before. And now, the game had changed. He wasn't the one in control anymore. I was. I let him sweat, let him squirm, let him feel the helplessness that I had felt for months. His power over our finances, over our life, stripped away. And as he finally understood, truly understood, the look on his face was priceless. Fear, confusion, regret, all tangled together. The man who had tried to deceive me was finally seeing the consequences of his own actions. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my life, reclaiming my dignity. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in months. Freedom. Freedom from the lies. Freedom from betrayal. Freedom from the fear that had kept me silent for far too long. And yet, the story wasn't over. Because Daniel, stubborn and prideful, wasn't ready to admit defeat. He tried one last move, one desperate attempt to regain control. But I had already anticipated it. Every step, every counter. And that, my friends, is where the final act begins. The next few days were tense. Every glance, every word between us was loaded. Daniel tried to act normal, but it was too late. I could see it in his eyes. The realization that his life, his choices, his betrayal, had led him here, powerless, exposed. He came into the kitchen one evening, trying that old charm, that half smile that used to melt me. "Look, I can fix this," he said, fumbling with his words like a man who had lost more than he thought. And I, pouring my tea as calmly as a storm brewing on the horizon, replied, "Fix what? Your lies, your betrayal, or the accounts you thought I wouldn't notice?" You could almost hear the air hiss out of him. It was beautiful, not gonna lie. He tried to argue, tried to promise he would change, tried to manipulate the fear in me, but I had already rehearsed every line he could throw. I had watched him twist truths, hide money, and lie without a blink. Now, I didn't just see through him. I anticipated him, and in anticipation, I held all the power. I explained calmly, almost academically, how I had handled the finances, how I had carefully removed access from his control, how every dollar had been redirected to protect my future, our future if he ever expected to be part of it. And with each word, I saw the color drain from his face further. Shock, guilt, regret, a cocktail he had mixed himself. There were tears, there were pleas, and there was silence, the kind that says everything without a word. I didn't enjoy hurting him, but I did enjoy the justice, the knowledge that the person who had shattered my trust could no longer harm me, could no longer hold sway over my life. By the end of that week, I had done more than reclaim what was mine. I had drawn a line, and Daniel, he learned, in the most personal way, that betrayal carries a price, one that can't be bargained around or smoothed over, one that can only be faced with humility and truth. And as he walked out, finally silent, finally aware of the consequences, I realized something. Revenge isn't just about taking back what was lost. It's about reclaiming yourself, and that is the power no one can ever steal again. Looking back now, I realize the story isn't really about the money. It's about trust, betrayal, and the choices we make when our world is turned upside down. It's about discovering strength we never knew we had, even when the ones we love the most break our hearts. I learned that anger, when harnessed, can be a tool, not just for revenge, but for reclaiming your life. That patience can outlast deceit. That silence can be louder than the harshest words. And that sometimes the most powerful way to fight back is not with rage, but with calm, calculated action. You see, betrayal cuts deep. It leaves scars. But those scars are also reminders. Reminders that we survived, that we are capable of standing tall, and that no one can take our self-respect without our permission. I didn't just take back what was mine. I took back control of my future, my dignity, my peace of mind. And if you're thinking, wow, that sounds dramatic. Well, maybe it is, but life rarely gives you the script. Sometimes you have to write your own ending. So here's the lesson I want to leave you with. Trust wisely, but never underestimate your own strength. When life knocks you down, don't just get up. Stand taller, plan smarter, and protect yourself. Revenge isn't always about the other person. It's about proving to yourself that you will not be broken, that you will rise, and that your story isn't finished until you decide it is. And as for me, I stepped into the quiet after the storm, knowing I had reclaimed more than money. I had reclaimed myself. And that, my friends, is a victory no one can ever take away.